The morning in Pine Ridge dawned with that typical laziness of small Virginia towns, where even the sun seemed to drag itself across the sky as if it were in no hurry to wake the world. Eleanor Ellie Wilson opened her eyes slowly, feeling once again that strange sensation of not knowing exactly where she was. For a few seconds, confusion took over her mind, until the familiarity of the objects around her brought reality back. It was her house, her bed, her everyday life. At 82, Ellie faced the daily challenges that Alzheimer's imposed without mercy. Some days were better, others seemed like a maze with no exit where her own memories were lost, like leaves in the wind. On this particular morning, she felt relatively lucid, managing to remember that it was Tuesday and that she needed to water the plants on the porch. "Good morning, old house," she murmured to herself, as she did every morning, addressing the yellowed walls that had witnessed decades of her life. The routine reassured her, preparing coffee, checking if there was water in the filter, sitting in the rocking chair on the porch and observing the almost non-existent movement on the dirt road. Across the street, Mrs. Martha Johnson, her neighbor of more than 20 years, waved from the window. She was a robust woman, with a loud voice and even louder opinions, who considered herself the unofficial protector of the neighborhood. "Good morning, Ellie. How did you sleep?" "Well, thank God," answered Ellie, though she didn't exactly remember how her night had been. "And you?" The morning conversation followed the usual script: comments about the weather, complaints about the lack of rain, and the basic gossip of the village. Ellie participated automatically, her mind wandering to places she couldn't always identify. Then something different happened. A strange sound interrupted the tranquility of the morning: scratches at the front door, followed by a low, prolonged whimper. Ellie frowned, trying to identify where that noise was coming from. Was it some animal, a child playing? Curious, she got up from the chair with some difficulty and walked to the door. When she opened it, she was momentarily speechless at the sight. A huge dog, with dark and golden fur, was sitting right on her doorstep. The animal looked like a German shepherd, but was visibly exhausted, with dirty and tangled fur. What caught her attention most was the torn vest it still carried on its body, clearly for professional use. "My heavens," whispered Ellie, instinctively taking a step back. The dog looked directly into her eyes, and something in that gaze reassured her. There was no aggression, only fatigue and a strange familiarity, as if those eyes had known her for a long time. "Where did you come from, boy?" she asked, surprising herself with the naturalness in speaking to the animal. As if understanding the question, the dog slightly tilted its head and emitted a low sound, almost like a response. Then, without any ceremony, it lay down completely on the doorstep, resting its head between its front paws. Ellie stood there for a few minutes, observing. Part of her mind tried to search for memories, some explanation for that situation. But everything came in a nebulous form. Still, an old instinct, perhaps from the times when she raised animals on her parents' farm, spoke louder. "You must be hungry," she said. Heading to the kitchen, she filled a bowl with fresh water and improvised a meal with pieces of cooked meat that had been left over from the previous lunch, mixed with rice. The dog drank the water eagerly, but hesitated before the food, carefully sniffing before starting to eat. "Picky, are you?" murmured Ellie, with a smile that hadn't appeared on her face for a long time. Throughout the morning, the dog remained there, sometimes lying on the porch, sometimes walking slowly around the small yard. Ellie watched it through the window, fascinated by the animal's behavior. It seemed to be guarding the house, attentive to any different movement or sound. Around noon, when the sun was already high, Mrs. Johnson appeared at the gate, visibly agitated. "Ellie, what dog is that? Where did it come from?" "It appeared here this morning," Ellie answered simply. "It was tired, thirsty. It seems to be a good animal." "But you can't keep an animal this size. What if it's dangerous? What if it's sick?" Ellie looked at the dog, which had approached and was now sitting beside her, as if it understood they were talking about it. "It doesn't seem dangerous, Martha. Just look how gentle it is. Gentle or not, this isn't right. I'm going to call Sarah. She needs to know what's happening here." The mention of her daughter's name brought a flash of clarity to Ellie's mind. Sarah, the doctor who lived in New York, always so worried, always so distant. It had been months since they had properly spoken. No need to bother. The girl, protested Ellie. She has her commitments. But Martha was already determined. She knew Ellie long enough to know that, despite her apparent lucidity, the disease sometimes prevented her from making sensible decisions. That afternoon, while Ellie was resting on the porch with the dog lying at her feet, the phone rang insistently. On the other end of the line, the familiar voice of Sarah carried a mixture of concern and irritation. "Mum, Mrs. Johnson told me you took in a stray dog. Is that true?" "He's not a stray, honey. He's a very well-educated dog. And he arrived here by himself. Mom, you can't keep an animal like that. What if it's sick? What if it attacks someone?" Ellie looked at the dog, which was watching her attentively, as if it knew the conversation was about him. "He's a good companion, Sarah. It's been a long time since I felt so peaceful." The word peaceful echoed in the silence that followed. Sarah knew her mother well enough to know that wasn't a word she used frequently in recent years. "All right, Mum. I'll ask for a few days off and come there. Please don't do anything until I arrive." After hanging up the phone, Ellie remained seated, looking at the dog that was now sleeping peacefully in the afternoon sun. For some reason she couldn't explain, she felt that this encounter had not been by chance. There was something about that animal, something familiar and at the same time mysterious, that awakened in her a feeling of completeness she hadn't experienced in a long time. As the afternoon shadows lengthened across the yard, Ellie gently stroked the dog's head and whispered, "You came for some reason, didn't you, my friend? Now we just have to find out what that reason is. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue." Night arrived in Pine Ridge with its usual quietness, but in Ellie Wilson's house, something had changed. The dog, which she had decided to call Rex, a name that naturally emerged in her confused mind, strategically positioned itself near the main door, like a silent guardian. Its ears moved constantly, picking up sounds that only it could distinguish in the darkness. Ellie, lying in her bed, felt strangely secure. For months she hadn't slept so peacefully, without the confusing nightmares that usually accompanied her nights. It was as if the animal's presence brought a peace she couldn't explain, but accepted with gratitude. Around 2 in the morning, a different noise broke the silence. Rex rose instantly, emitting a low, controlled growl. Someone was walking slowly down the street with deliberately silent steps. The dog approached the window, tense but didn't bark. Its evident military training prevented it from unnecessarily revealing its position. The shadowy figure stopped in front of the house gate, remaining there for long minutes. Rex remained motionless, just watching, as if assessing the threat level. When the person finally moved away, he returned to his post but remained alert until dawn. Ellie woke up not knowing about the night episode, but with a strange feeling that something important had happened. When she went out to the porch, she found Rex sitting exactly where she had left him the night before, like a soldier fulfilling his mission. "Good morning, my friend," she said, stroking the animal's head. "Did you sleep well?" Rex responded, with a discreet tail movement, his attentive eyes scanning the surroundings. Ellie noticed that he seemed different this morning, more alert, as if something had awakened a dormant memory in him. During breakfast, she tried different commands with the dog, more out of curiosity than for any specific reason. When she said, "sit" in English, Rex promptly obeyed. But when, without knowing why, she pronounced Platz, a word that came out of nowhere in her mind, the animal's reaction was immediate and almost military. He lay down in an attention position, eyes fixed on her, waiting for the next command. "Where did I learn that word?" murmured Ellie to herself, trying to search her foggy memory. The phone rang, interrupting her reflections. It was Sarah calling from New York with a voice loaded with rush and worry. "Mom, I got the time off. I'm leaving New York this morning. Cand will arrive there by late afternoon. How's the dog?" "He's fine, honey. He's a very intelligent animal. It seems like he even understands German." "German?" The surprise in Sarah's voice was evident. "Mom, you don't speak German." "I know, honey, but these words come out of my mouth without me knowing where they come from." After hanging up, Ellie remained thoughtful. Her memory was increasingly fragmented, but there were moments, especially when she was with Rex, when old memories seemed to come out of nowhere, like pieces of a puzzle she didn't know she had. Around noon, Mr. Frank Thompson, the local grocery store owner, appeared at her door with a concerned expression. He was a middle-aged man, with graying hair and a gentle way of speaking that always reassured the residents. "Mrs. Wilson, there was a strange man at the store this morning asking about a lost dog. He described an animal just like yours." Rex, who was lying on the porch, immediately raised his head upon hearing the conversation, his muscles visibly tensing. "What kind of man?" asked Ellie, instinctively moving closer to the dog. Tall, well-dressed, but with a somewhat military manner, he wouldn't give his name, just asked if anyone had seen a German shepherd with a tactical vest, offered money for information. "And what did you say?" "I didn't say anything, ma'am. Something about his manner didn't seem right to me. A man who won't give his own name isn't trustworthy." Rex had gotten up and was now walking restlessly around the yard, sniffing the air as if catching a scent that was both familiar and threatening at the same time. "Did he say anything else?" insisted Ellie. "Just that the dog is very important to him, and that he needs to recover it urgently. He left this card." Frank handed her a small white card without complete identification, just a name, Carlos, and a phone number. Ellie took the card with trembling hands. For some reason she couldn't explain, that name awakened in her a feeling of deep uneasiness. Rex approached and sniffed the paper, emitting a low, almost inaudible growl. "I think you'd better be careful, Mrs. Wilson, and wait for Sarah to arrive," suggested Frank before saying goodbye. Alone again with Rex, Ellie sat in the rocking chair and observed the animal's behavior. He was visibly agitated, walking in circles around the yard, occasionally stopping to sniff the air or look fixedly at the street. "You know this, Carlos, don't you, my friend?" she asked softly. The dog approached and rested his head in her lap. Her gesture she interpreted as a request for protection. Stroking the animal's fur, Ellie felt a wave of determination she hadn't experienced in years. "Don't worry," she whispered. "As long as you're here, no one will harm you." At that moment, without her knowing why, fragments of memories began to reorganize in her mind. Diffuse images of uniforms, voices speaking in foreign languages, and a persistent feeling that her own story was more connected to that dog than her compromised memory allowed her to understand. When the sun began to set, painting the sky of Pine Ridge with golden tones, Ellie remained on the porch with Rex by her side, both looking at the dirt road as if waiting for something. On the horizon, the lights of Sarah's car began to appear, but along with them, a growing sensation that the events of the next few days would forever change the quiet life of that small Virginia town. The blue Toyota Corolla of Sarah raised a cloud of dust as it stopped in front of her mother's house gate. At 45, Sarah Wilson Taylor carried on her face the marks of a life dedicated to medicine and the constant guilt of not being able to properly care for her mother. Her hands trembled slightly, the result of accumulated fatigue and the anxiety that always accompanied her when she needed to deal with family issues. "Mom!" she called as she got out of the car, carrying a small travel bag. Ellie appeared on the porch, followed closely by Rex. The scene made Sarah stop abruptly. The dog was even larger than she had imagined, imposing and clearly well-trained. But what surprised her most was the expression on her mother's face. There was a vivacity in her eyes that she hadn't seen in months. "Dear daughter, how wonderful to see you," said Ellie, descending the steps with more agility than Sarah expected. The embrace between them was long and loaded with unspoken emotions. Rex remained at a respectful distance, observing the interaction attentively, but without showing any aggression. "Is this the famous dog?" asked Sarah, still in her mother's embrace. "This is Rex. Rex, this is my daughter, Sarah." To Sarah's surprise, the dog approached calmly, allowed her to pet him, and then sat next to Ellie as if presenting his credentials. My God, Mum, he really is impressive. Where did you say he came from? He appeared here 2 days ago. He was tired, hungry, but very well-mannered. It seems like he was specifically looking for this house. Sarah observed the animal's behavior while talking with her mother. There was something different there, an almost human intelligence in the way Rex followed the conversation, turning his head from one to the other as they spoke. During dinner, Sarah noticed something even more extraordinary. Her mother was lucid in a way she hadn't witnessed in over a year. Ellie remembered details, made logical connections, and even told stories from the past with impressive clarity. "Mum, are you feeling okay? You seem different." "It's strange, honey. Since Rex arrived, my mind seems more clear, as if the fog were dissipating." Sarah, with her medical training, knew this didn't make sense from a scientific point of view, but she couldn't deny what she was seeing. She decided to address the issue that concerned her. "Mom, Mr. Thompson told me about a man who appeared looking for Rex. He said he left a card." Ellie's face contracted slightly and Rex immediately stood up, positioning himself between the two women and the door as if sensing danger. "Yes, someone named Carlos. I didn't like the way he sounded, according to Frank. Can we see the card?" Ellie brought the small white paper. Sarah examined it carefully. It was too simple, without proper professional identification. When Rex sniffed the card again, his reaction was immediate. He backed away, emitting a low growl. "He clearly doesn't like this man," observed Sarah. "Mom, I'm going to research missing dogs in the region. Maybe we'll discover where he came from." That night, while Ellie slept, Sarah stayed awake researching on the internet. After hours of searching, she found an article that left her perplexed. "Canine dog disappears during special operation on the VAWV border." The photo left no doubt. It was Rex. According to the report from 2 years ago, the German Shepherd called Rex had disappeared during a joint operation between the police and an unspecified federal agency. The animal had advanced military training and was being searched for by the authorities. "Rex," murmured Sarah. "Mum calls him Rex, and that's really his name." The next morning, she decided to test her theory. "Rex," she called softly on the porch. The dog immediately turned his head, alert, confirming her suspicion. But when Ellie appeared and said Rex, he responded in the same way, as if he had learned to accept the name. "Mom, I need to tell you something. I discovered where Rex came from." She explained about the article she had found, showing the photos on her cell phone. Ellie listened to everything attentively, but her reaction was unexpected. "I knew he wasn't just any dog," she said simply. "There's something special about him. Something that awakens memories in me." "What kind of memories, Mom?" Ellie remained silent for a long moment, her eyes lost on the horizon. "Sometimes when I'm with him, I remember your father. Not James, my husband, but your real father." Sarah felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. In 45 years of life, she had never questioned her paternity. James had always been her father, period. "Mom, what are you saying?" "Your biological father was German, honey. A good man, whom I met before marrying James. He taught me some words in German, which I never completely forgot, even with the disease." Rex approached Ellie, resting his head in her lap as if he knew she was reliving painful memories. "Why did you never tell me this?" "It was a different time, honey. And your German father, he had to leave forever. James was a wonderful father. To you. And that's what matters." Sarah sat heavily, trying to process the information. Suddenly many things made sense. Her facility with languages, some physical traits that always differentiated her from her parents, and now the strange connection between her mother and a German canine dog. "Mom, this German man, what was his name?" Ellie closed her eyes, concentrating on the fragmented memories. Carl Müller. He worked with training, special training." The house phone rang at that moment, interrupting the conversation. On the other end of the line, a firm masculine voice asked, "Mrs. Wilson, this is Carlos. I heard you found my dog. I really need to talk to you. Can I come by today?" Ellie looked at Sarah, who shook her head negatively. Rex had stood up and was visibly agitated. "I don't know what you're talking about," answered Ellie and quickly hung up. Mother and daughter looked at each other, knowing that something much bigger was just beginning to reveal itself. Carlos's call had left a tense atmosphere in the house. Sarah could see how Rex became restless after the phone conversation, walking around the house and constantly checking the windows and doors. It was as if the dog knew that something was about to happen. "Mom, we need to talk more about this, Carl Möller," said Sarah, trying to keep her voice calm despite the emotional storm she felt inside. Ellie sighed deeply, stroking Rex, who had positioned himself by her side. The animal's presence seemed to help her organize her thoughts more clearly. "It was in 1978, honey. I was only 20 years old and worked as a secretary at City Hall. Carl came to Pine Ridge as part of a technical exchange program. Officially, he was here to help with rural engineering issues, but what, Mom?" There was something more. He had knowledge that went far beyond engineering. He talked about training techniques, military discipline, strategies that I didn't completely understand at the time. Sarah felt as if she were putting together a complex puzzle. Each revealed piece created more questions than answers. "How long were you together?" 6 months, the most intense and at the same time most confusing months of my life. When I discovered I was pregnant, Carl became desperate. He said he couldn't assume paternity, that his mission here had ended, and that he needed to leave immediately. Rex emitted a low sound, almost as if he understood the pain in Ellie's voice. Sarah noticed that the memories, even painful ones, flowed with impressive clarity when her mother was near the dog. Did he say anything about why he had to leave? He talked about commitments in other countries, about a job that required absolute secrecy. On the last night we spent together, he taught me some words in German and said that if one day I needed to, I should use those words as a password. Password for what? I never fully understood. They were words related to training. Platz, bleib, such. He said that people like him left signs around the world, and that these words could help me recognize someone trustworthy. Sarah felt a chill. These were exactly the commands to which Rex responded with military precision. "Mom, what if he didn't arrive here by chance? What if someone sent him?" Before Ellie could respond, the phone rang again. This time, Sarah answered. "Hello? Dr. Sarah Wilson Taylor." The voice was different from the previous one, younger, feminine. "Yes, who's speaking?" "My name is Jessica Wilson. I'm your sister." Sarah almost dropped the phone. "Jessica, are you coming from London?" "I'm already in the US. I arrived this morning at Richmond International Airport. Mrs. Johnson called me yesterday, telling me about Mum's situation and about the dog. There are things you need to know, Sarah. Things about our family that only I discovered living in Europe." Jessica's imminent arrival brought a new layer of complexity to the situation. The two sisters hadn't spoken in more than 2 years, since a discussion about caring for Ellie that was never resolved. "Jessica, what kind of things?" "I can't talk over the phone. I'll be there in 4 hours. And Sarah, keep that dog safe until I arrive. You have no idea how important he is." The Sabin call ended, leaving Sarah with more questions than certainties. Ellie had followed the conversation with a worried expression. "Jessica is coming here," Sarah informed. "My girl, it's been so long since I've seen her. But why did she say Rex is important?" Before Sarah could speculate, Rex stood up abruptly, running to the front window and emitting a low growl. On the street, a dark car had stopped about 50 meters from the house. 2 male figures remained inside the vehicle, obviously observing the residents. "Mom, let's go inside, now." Sarah quickly closed all the curtains and windows. Rex remained near the front door, in a maximum alert position. His military training was evident. He knew exactly how to protect a perimeter. "Honey, I'm scared," whispered Ellie. "I am too, Mum, but we won't let anyone intimidate us." For the next 2 hours, the car remained on the street. Occasionally, one of the men would get out and walk slowly down the sidewalk, always observing the house. Rex followed each movement, tense like a spring ready to be triggered. Around 3 in the afternoon, Sarah's cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. Dr. Wilson Taylor, this is Carlos. I know you're scared, but I need to talk about the animal you found. He's not just a lost dog. He's a fundamental piece of an operation that could put many lives at risk if not properly resolved. What operation? Who are you exactly? I'm someone who worked with your biological father. Yes, I know about Carl Mueller. Rex was trained by him before Carl departed this life. The dog carries information that many people would like to have. Sarah felt her blood freeze. What kind of information? I can't explain over the phone, but I can guarantee that if you don't hand over the dog in 24 hours, other people will come for him, and these people won't be as gentle as I am. The call ended. Sarah looked at her mother and at Rex, understanding that they were at the center of something much bigger and more dangerous than they had imagined. Mom, we need to hold on until Jessica arrives. I have the feeling she might have the answers we're looking for. Ellie nodded, running her hand over Rex's head. We won't abandon. You, my friend, you came to us for a reason, and we're going to find out what that reason is. The dog looked directly into her eyes and, for the first time since he'd arrived, emitted a low, short bark, almost as if he were saying, "Thank you." If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. The taxi that brought Jessica raised a small cloud of dust as it stopped in front of the house. At 38, she maintained the elegance that had always characterized her, but her face carried a tension that Sarah recognized immediately. It had been 7 years since they had seen each other in person, and the reunion was happening amid circumstances that neither could have imagined. Rex reacted in a curious way to Jessica's arrival. Instead of the caution he showed with strangers, the dog approached her almost immediately, sniffing her with interest, as if recognizing something familiar. "Mom!" Jessica ran to embrace Ellie, and the reunion was emotional. But soon her eyes turned to Rex. "So this is the famous dog. My God, he's exactly as I imagined." "As you imagined?" asked Sarah, frowning. "Because I know who he is and I know why he came here." The three women gathered in the living room, with Rex strategically positioned where he could observe both the door and the windows. Jessica took a folder with various documents from her bag. In recent years, working as a translator in London, I began to research our family history. I discovered things that made me understand why I always felt different, why I always had a facility with European languages. Ellie held Jessica's hand, her eyes more lucid than they had been in months. "Mom, you didn't tell us the whole truth about Carl Miller," continued Jessica. "He wasn't just a technician on an exchange program." "What did you discover, honey?" Carl was a special agent, trained in East Germany for infiltration missions in South America. But something changed when he arrived in the United States. He fell in love with you, Mom, and decided to desert from his original mission. Sarah felt as if the ground were moving beneath her feet. Desert? Yes. Carl stole important information about an international network of military information trafficking, information that could compromise dozens of operations in various countries. Before disappearing, he trained some dogs with special techniques to guard this information. Rex stood up upon hearing the conversation, as if he knew they were talking about him. "Jessica, are you saying that Rex..." "Rex," Jessica corrected. "His real name is Rex, and he's the grandson of one of the dogs originally trained by Carl. The behavioral genetics were passed from generation to generation, along with the training." Ellie was listening to everything with an expression of growing surprise. "So he really came looking for me?" "Not exactly, Mom. He was sent." The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah was the first to speak. "Sent by whom?" "By Carl. He's still alive." The revelation fell like lightning. Ellie brought her hand to her chest, breathing with difficulty. Rex immediately approached her, laying his head in her lap in a gesture of comfort. "That's not possible," murmured Ellie. "It's been more than 40 years." "He lives in Germany, Mum. He assumed a new identity after deserting, but he never stopped worrying about you. When he found out you were sick, that your memory was deteriorating, he sent Rex to protect you." "But how did he know about Mom's illness?" asked Sarah. Jessica hesitated before answering. Because he always kept someone watching over you. From her distance, but he did. Someone watching? Sarah stood up, agitated. You mean we were being monitored? Protected, Sarah. There's a difference. The information Carl stole is still valuable to many dangerous people. You were always at risk for being his family. Rex stood up abruptly, running to the window. Outside, the dark car had returned, and this time there were 3 men instead of 2. They're back, said Sarah, quickly closing the curtains. Who are they? Asked Jessica. Someone named Carlos and his companions. He said he worked with Carl and that he needs Rex for some operation. Jessica's face paled. Carlos is not his real name. He's one of Carl's former partners who never accepted the desertion. He's spent decades looking for the information Carl hid. What information exactly? Insisted Sarah. Access codes, location of operational cells, identities of infiltrated agents in various countries. Information that, in the wrong hands, could cause a lot of damage. Ellie, who had remained silent, finally spoke. And this information is with Rex? Not exactly with him, Mom, but he knows where it is. Carl trained him to lead to the location only when he found you. The phone rang. Jessica answered quickly. Mrs. Wilson? Carlos's familiar voice sounded from the other end of the line. This is Jessica, her daughter. What do you want? Ah, the daughter who lives in London. What an interesting coincidence that you're here exactly now. Listen carefully, miss. You have 2 hours to hand over the dog. To me. After that, I can't guarantee the safety of anyone in that house. We're not handing over anything to you, Jessica responded firmly. Then you've chosen the hard way. I hope you're prepared for the consequences. The call ended. The 3 women looked at each other, knowing that time was running out. Mom, said Jessica, holding Ellie's hands, Rex will lead us to where the information is hidden, but we need to go now before it's too late. Rex approached Ellie, looking directly into her eyes as if asking if she was ready to discover the final truth. Then let's go, said Ellie, with a determination that surprised her daughters. It's time to discover what secrets Carl left behind. Thus ye. Decision was made quickly. They couldn't stay in the house with Carlos and his men watching their every move. Jessica suggested they leave through the back, taking advantage of the fact that Ellie's yard bordered a wooded area that led to a secondary road. Rex will guide us to where we need to go, said Jessica, checking the contents of her bag. But we need to move now before they decide to act. Ellie, surprisingly, showed more energy and determination than her daughters had seen in years. It was as if Rex's presence and the prospect of finally unraveling the mysteries of the past had awakened a dormant strength in her. Mom, are you sure you can do this? Asked Sarah, concerned. Honey, for 40 years I've carried the weight of not knowing the whole truth about Carl. If there's a chance to discover what really happened, I'm going all the way. Rex remained alert, moving with the precision of an experienced soldier. When Jessica whispered such, the German command for search, the dog immediately headed toward the back of the house, indicating the way. They left in single file. Rex in front, followed by Ellie, then Sarah and Jessica bringing up the rear. The woods were dense, but there was an old trail that Rex seemed to know perfectly. How does he know where to go? Asked Sarah, helping her mother cross a steeper section. Carl must have trained other dogs of this lineage to know this route, answered Jessica. It's like information passed down genetically. After 20 minutes of walking, they reached a clearing where there were the remains of an old structure, stone walls covered by vegetation, which must have once been a small house or storage building. Rex stopped in front of the ruins and looked at Ellie, waiting. It's here, she said, recognizing the place. Carl brought me here once, said it was a special place. Do you remember anything else about that day? Asked Jessica. Ellie closed her eyes, concentrating. Rex's proximity seemed to help her access memories that had long been blocked. He said he had buried something important here. An insurance policy were the words he used. He said that if anything happened to him, I should come back here with someone I trusted. Rex began to sniff around the ruins, focusing on a specific area near what must have once been the main wall. He started digging, and the women joined him, removing dirt and stones with their hands. Here. shouted Sarah, touching something solid in the ground. It was a metal box, larger than they expected, wrapped in plastic material for protection against moisture. The lid had a locking mechanism that seemed sophisticated for the time. "How are we going to open it?" asked Jessica. Ellie carefully observed the box. There were numbers engraved on the lid, but also symbols she didn't immediately recognize. "Wait," she said, remembering something. "Carl taught me a sequence of numbers. He said they were important." With trembling hands, she began to turn the digits of the mechanism. 19780425. Sarah's date of birth. The latch opened with a soft click. Inside the box were various documents in sealed plastic, photographs, microfilms, and a sealed envelope with the name Eleanor written by hand. Jessica carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in English, written with the careful handwriting that Ellie remembered perfectly. "Read it to us," asked Ellie, her hands trembling too much to hold the paper. Jessica cleared her throat and began, "My dear Eleanor, if you are reading this letter, it means you managed to get here and that my plan worked. First, I want you to know that I love you and that leaving Pine Ridge was the hardest decision of my life. But I had no choice." Jessica's voice trembled slightly as she continued. "The information in this box can save or destroy many lives. They are evidence of an international network that operates to this day, involving people in positions of power in various countries. I stole this information because I discovered they planned to use our love, our daughter, as a bargaining chip." Sarah felt tears running down her face without realizing it. "That's why I had to disappear, pretend my own definitive departure. I created a new identity and spent decades watching over you from afar, protecting you without your knowledge. Rex is my last gift to you. He was trained not only to find this box, but to protect our family." Ellie was openly crying now, and Rex approached her, offering comfort. "If anything happens to me, this information should be delivered to the German consulate in Washington, D.C. They will know what to do. But if I am still alive when you find this letter, it means we can finally meet again." Jessica stopped reading, looking at her mother and sister. "Is there more?" "Yes. He left an address in Germany and a phone number, and he says that if you call and say the word Kaiser, he'll know you found Rex and that it's safe to communicate." The sound of engines approaching interrupted the emotional moment. Through the trees they could see the lights of cars arriving at the entrance to the trail. "They found us," said Sarah, quickly storing the documents in Jessica's bag. Rex took up an alert position, growling softly. But this time his behavior was different. It wasn't aggression, it was protection. "We need to go back," said Jessica. "But now we have the cards on the table. We know what Carlos really wants, and we know that Carl is alive." Ellie held Rex's improvised leash, looking at him with new understanding. "You didn't just come to protect me, you came to give me hope," she whispered to the dog. "Hope that our story didn't end the way I thought it did." As they prepared to confront Carlos and discover his true intentions, the three women knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The past had finally caught up with the present, and now they needed to decide how to write the future. The car lights were rapidly approaching along the trail. Rex took a defensive position in front of the three women, his military training evident in every calculated movement. There was no time to escape. Carlos and his men had blocked the only exit from the clearing. "Come out from behind the trees," shouted a familiar male voice. "We know you're there, and we know you found what you were looking for." Jessica held the bag with the documents firmly, whispering to her mother and sister, "No matter what happens, don't hand over anything until we're sure of his intentions." Carlos emerged from the darkness, followed by two men with a military appearance. He was tall, with graying hair, with a visible scar on the left side of his face. At 60, he maintained the erect posture of someone who had spent his life in field operations. "Mrs. Wilson," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "we finally meet in person." "Who are you exactly?" asked Ellie, surprising everyone, with the firmness in her voice. "Someone who worked with Karl Mueller for many years, someone who was harmed by his betrayal." Rex emitted a low, controlled growl. Carlos observed the dog with professional interest. Impressive. The training really was passed on. Carl was always an excellent trainer. What do you want from us? Intervened Sarah. The information that Carl stole when he deserted. Information that belongs to an organization larger than you can imagine. Jessica stepped forward. And what organization would that be? Carlos laughed bitterly. You think Carl was the good guy in the story? He stole state secrets, compromised international operations, put dozens of agents at risk around the world. He did it to protect his family, replied Ellie, with a conviction that surprised even herself. Family? Carlos spat on the ground. He abandoned you without looking back. If he really loved you, he would have found another solution. You're lying, said Jessica. We know he always took care of us from a distance. Carlos's face contorted in an expression of anger. Carl told you that? How romantic. The truth is that he created this fantasy to justify his cowardice. Rex moved even closer to Ellie, as if sensing that the tension was dangerously increasing. Even if it were true, said Sarah, that doesn't give you the right to threaten us, right? Carlos laughed again. You don't understand the gravity of the situation. This information in the wrong hands can reignite conflicts that were buried decades ago, can put thousands of people in danger. And in your hands? Asked Jessica defiantly. It will be used for the greater good, to maintain world order. Ellie observed Carlos carefully. There was something in his behavior, in his expressions, that awakened a distant memory. I know you, she said suddenly. You were in Pine Ridge before. 40 years ago. Carlos stopped talking, his expression subtly changing. You're that man who appeared looking for Carl after he left, the one who said he was a concerned colleague. Mum, are you sure? Asked Sarah. I am. He was lying then, just as he's lying now. Carlos sighed, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. All right, enough theater. Yes, I looked for Carl 40 years ago, and yes, I've been looking for him to this day. Why? Demanded Jessica. Because he didn't just steal information. He stole my life. The revelation fell like lightning. Carlos walked a few steps, keeping his distance from Rex, but coming close enough so they could clearly see his eyes. Carl and I were partners. More than partners, we were friends, almost brothers. We were sent together on various missions to South America. When we arrived in the United States, I also fell in love. Ellie felt the world spinning around her. With whom? With you, Eleanor. I fell in love with you first, but Carl knew this and even so decided to win you over. The silence that followed was heavy. Rex moved even closer to Ellie, as if feeling her emotional distress. That doesn't justify 40 years of persecution, said Jessica. No? Carlos laughed bitterly. He didn't just steal the woman I loved, he incriminated me, made it look like I was the traitor. I had to live in hiding, assume false identities, while he disappeared with you and the secrets. But I didn't stay. With Carl, protested Ellie. He left and left me alone. Because I was getting too close, he knew I would discover where he was and resolve our differences personally. Sarah realized that Carlos was revealing more than he intended, moved by the emotion of finally being able to tell his version of the story. If you loved my mother, why are you threatening us now? Carlos looked at Ellie with an expression that mixed love and resentment. Because I need to close this chapter of my life. I need to find Carl and have my final conversation with him. And you think we're going to help you with that? You have no choice. The information you found includes Carl's current location. With or without your cooperation, I'm going to get to him. It was then that Rex did something unexpected. The E. Dog moved away from Ellie and walked slowly toward Carlos, but instead of aggression, his behavior demonstrated recognition. Carlos looked at the dog with growing surprise. Rex, is it really you? The dog emitted a low sound, almost like a whimper of recognition. You know Rex? Asked Jessica, confused. Carlos slowly knelt down, allowing Rex to approach. I helped train him when he was a puppy, before Carl disappeared with him. The final revelation was about to change everything they believed they knew about the story, of their lives. The interaction between Rex and Carlos had completely changed the dynamics of the confrontation. The dog, who moments before was in a defensive position, now showed a confused familiarity with the man who had threatened them. "If you helped train Rex," said Jessica, still suspicious, "then why did he react with so much fear when he sniffed your card?" Carlos stroked Rex's head, who allowed himself to be touched, although maintaining a certain reserve. "Because he was conditioned to fear me. Carl did this intentionally, as part of his plan to keep me away." Ellie, observing the scene, felt a mental clarity she hadn't experienced in years. It was as if all the pieces of the puzzle were finally fitting together. "Carlos," she said softly, "look me in the eyes and tell me the truth, the whole truth." He stood up, facing her gaze. For a moment, the 40 years that separated them seemed to disappear. "I loved you, Eleanor, I still love you, but the story I told isn't complete." "Continue," she encouraged. "It's true that I fell in love with you first, but it's also true that Carl realized this, and instead of competing with me, he tried to push me away to protect me." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the wind in the trees. "Protect me from what?" asked Sarah. "From the truth about myself." Carlos sighed deeply. "I wasn't just an agent like Carl, I was an assassin." The confession shook everyone present. Rex moved slightly away, as if confirming the veracity of the words. "Carl discovered that I had been sent not only to collect information, but to eliminate any witness who could compromise the operation, including American civilians who had had too much contact with us." Ellie brought her hand to her chest, understanding the magnitude of the revelation. "Including you, Eleanor. My mission was to gain your trust, and when we no longer needed you." "So, Carl saved my life," she whispered. "Yes, he stole the information and disappeared not only to protect you, but to give me an official reason to leave too. If I had stayed without completing my mission, I would have had to answer to my superiors." Jessica was still holding the bag with the documents, processing the revelations. "And why did you continue looking for him all these years?" "Because I truly learned to love when I met your mother. Carl showed me that there was a different way to live, to be human. When I left, I swore to myself that one day I would return to thank him and to redeem myself." Carlos looked directly at Ellie. "And also to ask your forgiveness for all the years you lived without knowing the truth." Jessica's cell phone rang. At that moment, she looked at the screen and turned pale. "It's a number from Germany," she said, showing the device to the others. "Answer it," requested Carlos. "I bet I know who it is." Jessica pressed the speakerphone button. "Hello?" "Jessica." A male voice with a heavy German accent sounded through the device. "This is Carl Möller. I know you found Rex and that you have the information." Ellie felt her legs weaken. Hearing Carl's voice after 40 years was like going back in time. "Carl," she whispered, "my dear Eleanor, how I've missed your voice." "How?" "Did you know we were here?" asked Sarah. "Rex has a location chip. I've been tracking his movements since he arrived in Pine Ridge. When I saw that you had found the box, I knew it was time to reveal myself." Carlos approached the phone. "Carl." "It's me, Carlos." The silence on the other end of the line lasted long seconds. "Carlos," Carl finally said, "you're still looking for me after all these years?" "Yes, but not for the reasons you imagine." "I know. I've been tracking your life too. I know you've changed, that you've become a different person. Then why did you never look for me?" "Because I wasn't sure if you had forgiven me for ruining our original plans." Ellie interrupted the conversation between the two men. "Carl, I need to know, did you really love me, or was I just part of a mission?" "Eleanor, you were the first person who made me question everything I believed in. My love for you was real. It still is real." "Then why did you leave? Why did you leave me alone with our daughter?" "Because I discovered that Carlos had received orders to leave no witnesses. If I had stayed, you two would have been in danger. Leaving was the only way to protect you." Rex approached Ellie, as if sensing her emotion. "There's a way to resolve all this," said Carl. "I would like to come to the United States. to finally meet Sarah in person and to reunite with you, Eleanor, if you'll allow me. Carlos spoke. Carl, the information, is it still dangerous? Not anymore. With the end of the Cold War, most of the data became obsolete. What still has value are the lists of people who were harmed by the operations, people who deserve reparation. Jessica looked at her mother and sister. Mum, what do you want to do? Ellie stroked Rex, looking at Carlos and then at the phone where Carl's voice waited for an answer. 40 years is enough time to hold on to grudges and misunderstandings, she finally said. It's time to heal the wounds of the past. Does that mean you accept that I come? Asked Carl. It means that we all need a second chance, you, Carlos, our family. Rex brought us here not just to find information, but to find peace. Carlos smiled for the first time since he arrived. Eleanor, you've always been wiser than any of us. Then it's decided, said Carl. I'll be there next week. And Carlos, thank you for looking after them when I couldn't. Thank you for teaching me that there's something more important than following orders, replied Carlos. When they hung up the phone, the three women embraced each other. Rex joined the group hug, his mission finally completed. A week later at Richmond International Airport, Ellie waited nervously beside her daughters. At 82, with a mind clearer than it had been in years, she prepared to reunite with the love of her youth. When Carl appeared at the arrivals gate, hair completely white, but the smile she always remembered, Ellie felt that her story had finally reached the ending it had always deserved. Rex, running alongside them in the yard of the house in Pine Ridge a few days later, observed the reunited family. Ellie and Carl talking on the porch, Sarah and Jessica planning changes to better care for their mother, and Carlos, who had decided to stay in town to help with everyone's transition. Sometimes, thought Rex in his canine wisdom, families need to get lost, to truly find themselves,